Well, I mean, I'm ready to go, but the countdown hasn't finished yet. Well, hang on a minute. Looks like people are already saying hi, so let me just roll into it here. Let's see. There we go. That works. Cool. So just double checking a few things here. I think my audio is good. It looks like lots of people saying hi below me, which is great. I look a little different, as you can probably tell. My green screen fell down, so you just see the brick wall behind me. The brick wall was always there. It's just usually it had a green like poster board, I guess quilt that I had made, and so it sort of fell apart. So I will probably put it back up, but I don't know. It's kind of nice having the natural light in here with a brick background. It's a pretty neutral background, not distracting, hopefully. So that's where I am. That's what it looks like. Hopefully the audio is coming through okay and the synchronization is okay. Sometimes it's been looking kind of weird today. Like it's been the audio video sync, and it's the kind of thing that if I've said it right, then maybe you don't notice it, but it distracts me. So I'm going to try not to look at myself. And yeah, DJ, that was this is really there, you know. I still have the chroma key filter on, so it's like you can see it, the remnants of it down here, you know. But yeah, here it is. That looks kind of cool. I also, well, when I was playing around, we have this green wiffle bat that is the right color green, and so I can make it like a spot of darkness with that if I want to. Pretty funny. So yeah, it's also like, I don't know if this caused it. This is kind of gross. I don't know if this caused this, but I had a bunch of duct tape on the side, and apparently several insects were trying to get like behind it, and they got stuck on the duct tape on the side, and so there's a lot of bugs. And so, I mean, not a lot, like 10, which maybe that's a lot, but it's kind of gross. They're mostly crickets. And oh, I just stepped on something. Some tape down there. Obviously I need to get a handle on this, but not right now. So today two things we're gonna talk about, or I want to talk about, and well, we can talk about if you have questions, and then that's sort of like a conversation. The first one I want to talk about actually is the peer teaching, because that's coming up on Wednesday or Friday for all of you. So I want to make sure you know what you need to do to be prepared for that. Also, this is important. So make sure you know what you're doing. Make sure you have a plan. You really can't make this up later. So this is something you have to do on the day you're scheduled to. I mean, there's an audience, there are peers waiting to be taught, and if you're not ready to teach them, then it won't happen. And this is a major part of the grade, like for the class. This is a major part of the class. So, you know, obviously things are scaled. I've scaled things back a lot this year, obviously, for all the distractions and all the reasons you know about. Normally you would be peer teaching 4 to 6 times in a semester of this class, but I've scaled that down to 2, and then I've kind of compress those into 2 weeks over the next 2 weeks. So it is still an important thing though, so I want to make sure that you spend that time getting ready for it and doing your best at it. All that said, it can be a fairly informal kind of teaching. So that is to say, I want you to be prepared, I want you to know your material, your ideas, but you know, you don't have to be an expert on your subject in order to teach it. And that's true in general, not just for this assignment. Like there's all kinds of things I cover in classes that I'm definitely not an expert on, but I learn about it and then I share it, and then by learning and sharing those things, I get to know it a lot better. And I find it really helpful for me to prepare a teaching lesson in the sense that I know the topic much better by the time I'm done preparing that lesson or that day of class or whatever it is. It's not just going back to the material, but organizing it in my mind. What are the important things? What order do I put them in? How do I get someone to know these things through an experience or an activity? Like designing all of that really solidifies it in my mind, or it helps solidify it. So I think that's something you will find helpful as well. And so that's why I'm insisting on this as part of the class. And of course, your peers, they will learn from you too, and that's great. But it's almost like that's almost secondary to the preparation that you put into it to be prepared to teach it. So yeah, hi Jules, hi everyone. So I want to talk a little bit about it. Make sure you know what you need to do. That may take a little time, I don't know, but then I want to spend as much time as I can talking about accessibility today, because that's the big topic for the week, and really my only topic for the week. Wednesday and Friday, it's all of you. Okay, great. Yeah, actually, so Gracie, we will talk about that in a sec, but I'll just tell you if you look at the assignment page, it is the due date that it is set. That, like, whatever your due date is, that's your teaching day. And I don't know them off the top of my head, but it is a differentiated due date. So for some of you, it's due Wednesday, some of you, it's due Friday, and that's how you know. All right, so let's take a look at that. Actually, we can go ahead and do that. I believe this OBS is still grabbing the wrong Firefox window. So let me see, where is that window? I don't even have that open anymore. What is it? Sorry, I'm just trying to find. OBS has been a little strange today too. Yeah. Not that one. This one. Yeah. Okay. That's weird. So, oh yeah, I've been trying to get Spotify working, and I still can't. And I think I found this tutorial that might actually fix my issue, and I have not had a chance to go through it yet. So that's what that tab is. In case you're wondering, I usually have, I like to have Spotify playing on these before class actually starts, but it has not been working recently. Okay, so this is Peer Teaching Topic 1, and Topic 1 means this week. Topic 2 means next week. You're doing both of those. Everybody's doing both this week and next week. It's just you're doing these on different days. Your first topic this week should be something related to whatever it is you're teaching, whatever your big project is about. And then your second topic of teaching is next week, and that's when you will teach us something about your method. So if you're, like the classic example I've been going with is if you're creating a podcast about climate change, this week you're talking about climate change, next week you're talking about podcasting. If you're, just to kind of go through some examples, if you're doing a twine game about nutrition, this week teach us about nutrition, next week teach us about twine. If you are doing an annotated map about human trafficking, this week tell us about human trafficking, next week tell us about the annotated map software that you're using. So hopefully that part is clear. If you have questions or not sure, it's always okay to ask. Don't feel bad about it. If you need to ask for clarity, I'm always happy to clarify. So I want to make sure you're ready, so please ask. And yes, this happens during class on Wednesday, so it needs to take place during class on Wednesday. So that's at 1:40 to, 1:40 to 2:30, or 2:50 to 3:40, whatever your period is, section 1 or section 2, that's when it should happen. So you need to be ready to go at the beginning of class. If you're pre-recording anything, it needs to already be pre-recorded and uploaded and shareable before class begins. If you're going to do something live, you need to have your plan ready, and yeah, a little bit of coordination for that. So I imagine that the first bit of class on Wednesday and Friday will be just logistics, sort of shuffling around, finding the right, making sure that each teacher has an audience, and there'll be somewhat in person with the people in person, and then somewhat online, and I'll do my best to get through it. But the plan is to that time will be yours to do whatever the teaching. We will hopefully be able to get through 3 rounds of teaching in each period. But we'll see. This is going to be a little different and certainly more complicated than it normally is. So these are the 3 formats that I can think of. I'm still open to suggestions if you can think of anything else, but these are the ways that I can think of for you to deliver content. And really, these are the 3 things that I do essentially. So, and and like what everyone does, I think. So it makes sense to me, but again, let me know if something else comes to mind. The first thing is only available, of course, if you're in person. And so if you're in person, you can either give a lecture kind of thing or a workshop kind of thing. And which one of those you choose, more lecture or more workshop, I mean, it depends on how you want to approach it. I basically trust you to pick a method for doing that. If you've taken this class in small group communication, maybe you got some good ideas about how to lead a workshop. If you've recently taken public speaking, maybe you're interested in thinking about that kind of presentation. This isn't the class that really emphasizes those skills, although we use them and benefit from them. So I'm trusting you to pick a format that works for you. And if you have questions or if you'd like advice about how to approach that, I'd be happy to give you that, but I'm not really going to be grading you on that. So I'm not super concerned about it. But we'll see how it goes, and you're going to have 2 teaching opportunities. You're going to get feedback on your first one, and I would like for you to use that feedback to improve your second time, basically. So if things don't go well as a lecture the first time, maybe try something different the second time. Okay, so we'll see how that goes. Now, options 2 and 3 are basically the same 2 options, but delivered online. So, well, it's sort of 3. So we'll say option 2, this is where you are live, like I am right now. You're streaming video, you're talking in real time with people that are hearing you talk in real time. As such, you can use that kind of setup, that kind of connection to give a lecture and just be you're the one talking. That's how I'm doing it right now. Or you could have something organized more like a workshop where you have interaction and you have a conversation, like a small group conversation. I think that small group conversation will take a bit more planning. I think it's something that's hard to do well online, just in my experience. But if you want to try it, then by all means. I don't have any reason to tell you not to do it. In that case, you have several different ways you can communicate with people. It would be a good idea to check with your squad ahead of time to see what methods they would like. So in other words, if you want to have that conversation with your squad, you can certainly use a Discord voice channel. I can set those up for you. Or you can set up a Zoom call. You can use Whereby. That's the system I use for my office hours. So there are different ways you could do that. If you're just going to be streaming and talking like I am, you could certainly use Twitch. If you already have a Twitch account, right? I mean, there's a bit of setup for that. So that your mileage may vary, but if you would like, I can give you advice about how to set up Twitch. You can also live stream with YouTube, or just you can have that Zoom or that voice channel, and just you can be the only one talking. Like we don't have to overcomplicate this. There are so many ways to talk to each other digitally now through networked video that I don't think we'll have a problem finding a way for you to do this. But if you have a question, if you'd like advice, then certainly feel free to reach out. The main thing is that you should know your stuff and you should have a plan. So make sure you know that. Finally, so a pre-recorded lecture is certainly the easiest thing logistically, because if you just pre-record it, you upload it, then I just need to make sure that your audience, your peers, have a link to it. And that's easy, but the challenge is, of course, that takes more work ahead of time. Like you have to actually record it. Which, these don't have to be heavily edited. These don't have to be like fancy videos with lots of sections and graphics and stuff like that. I mean, you're welcome to go nuts if you want, but these are really just meant to be teaching some content, and a slideshow with yourself talking over it could be fine. All right, so if that's what you want to do, then just make sure that it's uploaded in a way that's accessible, in other words, that people can get to it. So if it's on YouTube, you can put it on YouTube as an unlisted link, and that way it will remain somewhat private. That many people do prefer to do it that way. That's fine. I think you can do it with Google Drive. Might be able to do that with Vimeo. I don't totally know, but like everything else in here, I trust that you, as a digital studies student, can figure out how to get your content online. But if you'd like advice or you have questions about a particular platform, just let me know. I do think YouTube is the easiest, probably. But I say that having used YouTube a lot recently, so it's easy to me because I've been doing it. So if you have any questions about how to get your things online or how to film or anything like that, just let me know. I will say for all of these methods, except for I guess the in-person one, but any of the digital ones, I'm not going to insist on you being on camera with this. If you would like to just record audio of yourself, that's okay, but you should also have a visual. So it's not just like an MP3 of you talking. but an actual like slideshow with your audio recorded on top of that, that would be acceptable to me. But think about how well that may or may not connect with your audience. Being on camera, I think, helps me. Sorry, my screen just fell apart a little bit more. When I'm on camera, I feel like of course, you can see me, you can connect with my emotions, or you can hear my emphasis, and you can kind of see me as a person. So I think that works better than if you were just hearing my voice. But you know better than me whether that's working, whether that's true or not. But that's my impression. I tend to listen to and learn from people if they're talking on a video. I tend to learn better if they're actually appearing visually, at least part of the time, on camera. So that's a bit of advice. Yeah. I watch a lot of YouTube videos, obviously, for DIY kind of stuff, or like fixing stuff around the house. And the catapult video. I made a catapult for Halloween. I watched several videos, and there's one guy who really thorough, like 700 plus videos on his YouTube channel, all about catapults. The guy is obviously an expert and has lots of things. But the videos I was watching, he kept doing this thing where he would like set up the tripod, like pointing at his workbench, and then he would be off camera talking. So let me see if I can mimic what he was doing. So he'd be off camera and be like, okay, so first we're gonna do this and blah blah blah. And then he would step into the shot, and then he'd do the thing with his back to the camera, and then he'd like step away, and then so you couldn't see him doing the thing while he was doing the thing. So at least in the one video he talked. Maybe he fixed or realized a better way to do it later on, but it was an example where it would have been helpful for him to talk first, and then maybe just see his hands doing whatever assembly, and then talk again, as opposed to how he did it. So anyway, think about those things as you're doing it. All right. So as I'm talking, feel free to put out any questions. Discord has been kind of weird today, so if it doesn't send your message through, then you can also use the Twitch chat. But it looks like it's working now, so hopefully that's fine. I did notice too, speaking of Discord, it looked like a couple of you I know a couple of you have different names, like nicknames in our server than your like main nickname in Discord, and it was showing up as the wrong nickname for a couple of you. So maybe you changed your nickname in our server, or maybe something was happening weird in Discord. I don't know. Okay, so it is so nice out here right now. By the way, I'm just like watching all the leaves falling in my backyard. It's a nice fall day. It's hot for November, but it's nice in a way too. My trees have all decided it is actually fall, even though it's warm, and so everything is nice and colorful and like raining down. I have a ginkgo tree in my front yard, and it went yellow like yesterday, like all of a sudden. So it's pretty cool, and it's starting to fall. And my experience with this ginkgo tree is like it'll turn yellow and maybe linger yellow for a week or so, up to a week or so. But then, like if there's a night where it drops below freezing, all the leaves will fall off just at once, and it's kind of funny how fast that is. Okay, so finally, the last thing here, two more things. Sorry. When you are done learning from someone, so this is a feedback situation. When you're done learning with someone, please use this teaching feedback form. I'll send you this link again on Wednesday and Friday. Unless I come up with something else, I think it might make sense just to do this in Canvas, but this is the form that I used last year, so it's here. And it's where it's kind of like the peer review feedback on the proposals, actually, so maybe I will just put this in Canvas. But the point is that you're going to give your teacher some feedback, and pretty straightforward, I hope, and pretty self-explanatory, actually. So you should do that immediately after the teaching is done, so you don't forget, and then that'll come into a like inbox kind of thing that I have, and then I will send that out to each teacher once I have that. Or I might just do it all through Canvas. So I will send you the link I'll send you either this link again, or I'll just do it through Canvas. But the thing for you to turn in as the teacher is turn in whatever you have ahead of time. So if you have just an outline for your discussion, like a document, that would be fine to turn that in. If you do have a video that you pre-recorded, then submit the link to that. If you, that's all I can think of. Any media that you create, whatever you've done ahead of time, just submit it here so I can see what I want to see that you had a plan before class started, that you didn't just sort of make it up as you went along. Okay, great. So Any questions with that, please let me know before I move on. Hello, Samantha. And I see some typing, so I'll wait for that question to come through. Yes, your squad is your audience. So Alex just asked, are we doing peer teaching with the squad? And that's the idea, yeah. I say that's the idea. You might have to be flexible in the sense that if it turns out like no one in your squad is online, then I will help you find a squad or find somebody to teach to, but that's the default assumption that you will have at least one member of your squad online, and you will be able to teach to them online if that's how you're doing it, or they'll be in person. So that's why I said earlier, like on Wednesday and Friday, the first part of the class will likely be some logistics and just making sure everyone knows what they're doing and who they're talking to. But we'll roll with it. Just be ready at the beginning of class so I can help you find each other. Like there are some squads that have been a lot quieter. Some of them have been very active. So and some of that's just because, like I know in some of the squads, like you're all seeing each other face to face anyway, so you don't have as much reason to connect or check on each other online. Others, I don't know where you are, so I hope you're checking in and just lurking, but I don't know, so I'm a little concerned. But yeah, basically, it's your squad, that's your audience. All right, cool. So if everything's good, then I'm gonna move on to talk about accessibility for the next little bit here. I don't know if it'll be 30 minutes, I don't know, we'll see what happens. But I do have some slides and some thoughts, and so I will take you through it here. All right, so this is a slideshow, obviously, and this slideshow actually is available in, I actually edited it a little bit, but there is if you go to the file section of our Canvas site, it's creating with accessibility, and you might want to look at it this way as I'm talking, or just for reference later, because there are a few links in it, and you might want to visit those links. So most of those are correct, I think. But if you see a broken link, let me know. This presentation, this slideshow comes from a presentation that Allison Grimes created last year. Allison Grimes used to work for us at UMW in the Office of Disability Resources. She has since moved, so she is no longer here to teach, but this is her PowerPoint, and I guess I should have asked her, but I'm sure she wouldn't mind mind me using it this year, although maybe I should have checked with Danielle to see if they have an updated version. But this is the same idea. This is the Office of Disability Resources. They created this presentation actually for this class because they knew, and because I talked to them about the fact that you all were creating lots of different kinds of things, and those kinds of things might require different strategies. And so this presentation starts with some kind of big picture philosophical things to address kind of the reality and the need of accessibility, and then gets into some specific strategies and checklists that you should use for different kinds of things that you're creating. So let's get into it. The biggest thing to think about, and this is something that kind of underlies just about everything that you're doing, is the thing you're creating public or private? And I think there are probably degrees of public, but there are certainly, if it's just private, then that's usually pretty self-explanatory. But if it is public at all, it is required to follow the federal law, and this is the federal law. Specifically, it's Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And so there are several guidelines for how to do this, and they have lots of acronyms. So there's the WCAG, I guess. I don't know if people actually say it that way, but the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, accessibility standards, and the W3C, that's the World Wide Web Consortium, and they're the body that says what HTML is, and that's what web browsers implement, and that programmers learn how to write in order for it to actually exist. So it's interesting, like other programming languages like Python, that's developed by a core team. It's open source, I think, but it's core people, developers, and they just create it. The W3 is actually a bigger, it's like an international organization. It's a consortium, and it's a group of engineers basically that decide how the web should work. And there's quite a bit about accessibility and how they've decided and described it to work. Way back when we were looking at GeoCities, I was showing you in some cases kind of old-fashioned ways of doing things. And when I say that, when I call something old-fashioned, it means that it's been superseded by something better. And it's been superseded in the sense that the W3 is saying, do it this way now. in many cases, that's because of accessibility concerns. So things like the blink tag and the marquee tag are really, I mean, we kind of enjoyed playing around with those as kind of a joke, but they really are bad for accessibility. Like they really are going to hurt someone's eyes. Someone with epilepsy that might be triggered with strobing imagery, they could see that and it can really give them a headache or even cause a seizure. So those are real concerns, right? I mean, those are things that when the W3 says we shouldn't be doing this anymore, web browsers should not support these elements anymore, it's because they recognize that the use of those elements was inherently problematic for accessibility. It inherently made content less accessible. So other improvements to HTML were more subtle, but those were pretty clear. Like the blink tag, really you should never use. Unless it's a joke or unless it's part of the design or unless there's reasons. And in those cases, you should have a warning saying content warning or trigger warning, like literally this may cause difficulty for people who have issues with photosensitivity. And you see those kind of notices on media all the time. So that's something that you would create if you were doing it that way. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent, I apologize. Let's move on. So thinking about your audience. This is actually important because I mean, in your proposal, I did ask you to think about your audience, and you often talked about like people online, people at UMW. What this slide hopefully illustrates is that whatever you described as your audience, it is present on this slide, and that audience does include people who will need different accommodations in some cases or different considerations in order to access your content. So if you are accessing children under age 18, then 2 to 3 out of those 1,000, out of every 1,000, have some form of hearing loss. So if you are trying to reach as many people as possible, if your content requires it to be heard, if that's the only way you created it, then you're taking off a chunk of your content, of your potential audience right there. 2 to 3 out of 1,000 doesn't seem like a lot, but like think of it at like UMW, that's like, so what do we have, like 5,000 undergrads? So you're talking about cutting out 20 people and just saying that they're not going to see your content or they're not going to access your content. Like that's a lot. That's like the size of one section of this class. So, that's something that, again, you want to be aware of and an issue. You want to be making sure that you're not preventing people from accessing your content, right? So again, these statistics here, 2.4% of the US population has a visual impairment. And 15% have some form of some trouble hearing. And this is a different statistic. So you notice that this is 15% of adults ages 16 and up. As people get older, the possibility of having some hearing loss increases, of course. And so that if that's at all part of your audience, this is a much bigger percentage of people that might have trouble with your content if hearing something is the only way to access it, if that's how you created it. So I think this is pretty interesting, right? So also low vision or blindness, these are also issues that affect many people, millions of people around the world. You're trying to reach as many people as possible, so if you're going to be cutting out millions of people, you've kind of failed in that sense. So you want to make sure that you're aware of and are addressing these kinds of things. I thought also this was interesting just in terms of the Virginia state. Many of you are thinking kind of locally or regionally with your issues, and indeed, these are issues, these access considerations actually apply to Virginia, to UMW, to Fredericksburg. They apply in ways that are measurable that we can comment on, and and that some of you experience, honestly. Like this is something that I think is important for us to be aware of. Okay, so another way to think too about accessibility is that of course there are different kinds of disabilities and that people live with, but in most cases, as you'll see, when you design with accessibility in mind, you're improving the design for everyone. So it's not just like you are accommodating certain people, except in certain situations. But for the most part, if you design it as access for all, like if you design to make sure everyone can access your content, you're going to build better content for everyone, whether or not they have a specific need that has to be accommodated in terms of working through your content. So this is something that it's a good thing to aspire towards anyway, even if it weren't the law. So let's move ahead. Now here's a way to start breaking down the nuts and bolts of what you need to accommodate to make sure your content is accessible. Actually, you know what? Before this, let me jump to something because I think it might be interesting. I was going to jump to this a little bit later, but it just occurred to me this is maybe a better segue. This is one of the resources that's linked later on in the slideshow. This is accessforall.pressbooks.com. I'm pretty sure I linked to this in the, I want to say the proposal instructions, but this is a web book created by Office of Disability Resources at UMW, and I think it's really helpful. I think it is probably more helpful or it's more geared toward faculty than students, but the advice is good either way. You are creating content that people will interact with, so you need to know about it. Like some of the stuff is sort of, like it talks about Canvas, like how to create content in Canvas that's accessible, and you probably aren't creating content in Canvas. That's an example of how it is a little bit faculty oriented, but it is still good advice. And I thought this was an interesting way of thinking about it. Okay, this kind of breaks down some of the laws, and this is good to know. It's good background. And just if you're concerned about this, the way that these guidelines work, these are guidelines and not, I guess, requirement. I mean, it's not like the details of compliance are spelled out in the law. It's more just like you should make your content accessible, and then here are some guidelines that other bodies have created that are telling you how to do that in the best ways. So for example, when I talk about alt attributes on images, it's not like the Americans with Disability Act says you have to include alt attributes or your content is in violation of the law. It doesn't spell that out in that much detail, but so in other words, you're not going to be fined or sued for failing to include an alt attribute. Some larger organizations might be, but you as an individual are not. These are the best ways to do things. These are the right ways to do things. So anyway, let me go in there a little bit. I think just looking at this is a video, obviously. I think this graphic is a good way to think about what it is we're trying to accomplish when we think about accessibility. And this graphic appears in different forms and actually different contexts for different kinds of things, often in the context of social justice, for example, or restorative justice. But this is also like this, just the metaphor here I think works pretty well for accessible content as well. So in the first image, we see 3 people standing on, I guess, crates, boxes, a tall person, a middle height person, and a short person. And they are all facing a baseball game. There's a fence between them and the baseball game. So the way that it's positioned right now, the tall person and the medium person can see over the fence because all 3 of them are standing on boxes. But the shorter person still can't see over the fence. So this is illustrating the problem. That's the first one here. The first panel in this comic illustrates the problem, which is that some people can't see the ball game. They can't watch they can't access the lecture notes. They can't do whatever it is that they're trying to do. But the baseball game here is the content. Okay, so in the second image, this is illustrating accommodations. So in the second image, individuals are given supports to make it possible for them to have equal access to the game. So in the second image, all 3 people can see the game. The tall person does not need to stand on a box, so they're just standing there. The middle person needs 1 box, and they can see over the fence with 1 box. The shorter person needs 2 boxes. So they stand in the 2 boxes, and now they have access to the game. And so this is what we call accommodations. We have accommodated the short person and the middle-heighted person, but not the tall person because they didn't need it. The third image is different. In the third image, we replace the wooden fence with a chain link fence that all 3 people can see through, and all of them have access to the ball game equally. So when we talk about different strategies, we're talking about, when we say there are different strategies, we're acknowledging that there are 2 different ways to solve the problem that you see illustrated in the first panel, where some people can't see the ball game. Sometimes that means adding extra support for people that need a specific kind of support. Sometimes that means, and is the better case if possible, remove the barrier that prevents that access entirely, and then everyone benefits. Everyone sees sees the ball game without needing any accommodation. So this is a metaphor. Obviously, how it plays out in your specific content will vary. But an example of accommodations is like if you have someone who has a low vision problem and you want to show them something, you need to make sure you have a text description of it as well. That's an accommodation that you will probably have to create. Like you will probably have to create a text description of it. It's not sort of built into it. But that's an accommodation for that person to have access to that information. Another approach might be rethinking whether or not showing something is even the best way to get that across. If it's better just to have a text description of something, maybe just have that instead of the image, and that might be okay. All right, so that's just, I thought that was an interesting kind of, it's a little philosophical, but hopefully you can think through how in some cases for certain media, for certain kinds of access, you will need to do some extra work to make that access possible. In other cases, you might just need to redesign or rethink the thing that you created in the first place. So let's go back to slideshow. All right, so thinking about the things that are going to happen with your content. So think about the interaction. And this is kind of like the usability breakdown where we're thinking about the different things that the system is doing. But think about it in terms of what an individual is responsible for. You give them their work, you share the link, whatever. What do they do with it? So do they need a mouse? Can they use a keyboard? Is there some way to navigate the document without a mouse? What this is highlighting is that some people have dexterity limitations, and for them, using a mouse to click on specific places could present a challenge. So is there some way that you can create your content in a way that lets them use the tab key on their keyboard to jump from link to link? Many times this will happen automatically in your web browser. If you're designing complicated web pages, though, you do need to design for this. And it comes down to two things. I don't want to get too wonky with this because this is only a few of you that will probably come across this issue. But to create navigation that, oops, I was trying to highlight that, I guess I can't. To create navigation with a keyboard, there is an attribute called tab index that you can assign to any links or any content actually on your website, on your HTML page, that specifies which order those will go in if someone just hits the tab key and moves through the links on your web page. You'll see someone using this in a moment in a video I'm going to show you in a second. Sometimes like WordPress will probably do that automatically, but you should still check. Twine does do this automatically, but you should still check. And also Twine is kind of unusual because it is the web, but it's not really the web. And so as far as like headings and structures like that, there's no real sense of that at all in Twine. But as far as keyboard navigation, it does actually work that way. Okay, so the visual access, do they need to see and recognize colors to interact with your content? If so, that might be a problem. You should make sure that the content has color. If it does have color, it does require color, make sure that that color has enough contrast to convey what it's trying to convey. And wherever possible, avoid simply using color to indicate something important. A simple example is if you're creating link text in the middle of a paragraph, you have some text you want to make a link, you highlight it, you say make this a link, or you type the href equals whatever to make it an HTML. Make sure that when someone sees that link that it's not just a different color, because for some people that could be a challenge. I have seen many times a website that looks like it's an elegant, and WordPress themes do this a lot. It's an elegant layout, looks kind of sophisticated, but like the text will be like dark gray, and then links will be just slightly darker gray, and they're very hard to see. And I wear glasses, but I'm not what would be considered someone with low vision, and I can't see them. So I imagine someone that has harder time seeing than I do would have a really hard time seeing those links. Like I literally have to kind of scrub along with my mouse to see what a link is. And I'm not going to show you any examples because I don't want to embarrass anyone, but there are people's colleagues or other people that should know better creating content with that kind of link navigation. So it's an easy thing to get wrong, especially if you're just relying on a WordPress theme designer. Make sure that you check for this, and if you're evaluating different WordPress themes, make sure you choose a good one, or that you take steps to make sure the links are visible. Okay, stay away from splashing imagery, obviously, as I mentioned with the blink tag. Also, and this was a good one, checking to make sure that it is accessible on a mobile device. This introduces a slightly different aspect of accessibility, but not everyone has a computer, not everyone has a mouse. So thinking about how different people might use it includes thinking about different types of screens. So I do a lot more on my phone than I used to in terms of web content, and you can tell when a website has not been designed for the web. It just looks terrible. You can't find your way around it. But increasingly, websites are better at designing for the web, and many websites now even design for the web first, and then they do the desktop layout as an afterthought. If you're designing with HTML, or if you're using a WordPress theme, you should definitely check as many different kinds and sizes of screens as possible as you're trying to evaluate your work. And then finally, auditory access, and this is true of both video or like a podcast. Make sure that you have like a text-based thing. So if any audio is required, make sure that there's a text alternative as well, right? And that like I was showing you with that Lowe's video the other day, it actually helps everybody. Like, it's not just sort of there for people who can't hear the words being spoken, but for someone who needs to just skim the content or like jump to a specific part of it, that transcript makes it much easier to do that for all of us. So it's a great example of how accessibility, making your content accessible helps more than just people with disabilities. Okay, good. So this is a short video that I actually want to try and show you. Hopefully this works. It's a demo of someone using screen reader software. So whenever you're creating content that will be accessed on the web, someone might be using a screen reader to access that content. So this is especially important for those of you creating web-based projects. So I'm thinking of like Wayne, Crystal, anyone working with Twine, anyone working with building a Katya, anyone working with websites. You want to make sure that you know how. I think this is important to know how this works. So let's take a look at this video and see if this. Hopefully this works. Make sure that you get the audio from this.
This is Mark Sutton from the University of California, San Francisco's IT Web Services Department. Here today with a brief tour of screen reading technology. I'm a blind person who has been using screen readers, braille writers, scanning equipment, other adaptive technologies since my childhood. What a screen reader does is, for example, I'm going to start to read this page.
Navigation 1. Link, University of California, San Francisco. Link, about UCSF. Link, search UCSF.
And what I will now do is slow down the speech rate.
Rate 80%, 75%, 70%, 65%, 60%, 55%, 50%, 45%, 40%. Link, UCSF Medical Center.
So as I was about to say, a screen reader converts what's on a computer screen into information that can be displayed through synthetic speech or braille output. And it does that by allowing you to use a computer instead of a mouse, a computer keyboard instead of a mouse. You can also use a braille display as an input device.
End of navigation.
And what it does is it cleverly determines what's on the screen and presents you that information in a way that would allow for efficient navigation of these pages. So for example, I could just keep reading.
Banner 3 items. Visited, link, image, home.
Line by line, and we could be here all day. Or I could jump to the first heading on the page.
Heading level 2, search for heading level 2. You are here. Heading level 1, make videos accessible.
So as I'm moving down through the page, I can look for the category that interests me. And I'm just using commands built into the screen reader. So that's all a pretty simple description of what a screen reader is all about. Now I'm going to go over and show a few examples of how that can fall apart. So I have a couple graphics on this page.
Mark Sutton hands on a MacBook Pro image.
So the first one is well described and uses an alt tag.
You are currently on it.
To describe what the graphic is all about. Now we go to the next graphic.
Reader 042116.jpg.
Much less useful. So it's important to use those elements. It's also true for tables. So I'm going to move to a table.
FDA approved medications. Table, 3 columns, 5 rows. FDA approved medications. Table.
So the table is pretty self-explanatory, and I'm going to move into the table.
Medicine. Approved. Column 2 of 3.
And then if I go down into the table.
Medicine. Tolbutamide.
And as I move across.
Approved. 1975. Column 2 of 3.
We're getting the labels for the column headers and row headers. So it's important when programming tables, forms, and other elements on the web pages to use the proper HTML codes. I'll go to the
Table 3 columns.
Second table on the page.
Medicine. Row 2 of 5 tolbutamide.
And as I'm in the
Tolbutamide.
table, I move across it.
Row. November 1995.
I get a date, but I don't know what that date is associated with. So it's important, as I was saying, to include proper coding tags for all these elements. These are just a few highlights.
Okay, I'm back. Hey, so the what that video was just showing is the what it actually sounds like for someone using a screen reader. And as you heard there, it's actually when he first started, it's incredibly fast. And so that that shows how this user, Mark Sutton is his name, is used to hearing audio read that quickly and can parse it quickly and understand it very quickly. But that's possible only if the page has been prepared for that. If it's and you saw the difference there. When the alt attribute is there to read out a description of the image, it makes sense. When it just simply reads the file name .jpeg, it does not make sense to someone who only has access to it that way. So make sure that this is a good example of how alt attributes can make a difference. And he doesn't really get into nitty-gritty here. He doesn't show you how to do an alt attribute. Just says make sure you do it. Make sure you do it right. And similarly with the table, he doesn't get into how to do it, but he just said make sure you do it properly. And if you want to do it properly, there are all kinds of guides. And you recall maybe from our HTML and CSS experience, W3 Schools has quite a bit here. W3 Schools, I don't believe they are officially affiliated with the W3 consortium, but they they present the same things. They present like how to do the things that the W3 consortium has defined, including how to do things like tables. So if you take a look at tables, it does have several bits of structure to it. And one of these is that this is the first row. It has a TR element that contains several TH elements. TH means table header, as opposed to TD elements in subsequent rows. And these TDs stand for table data. And if you've coded them that way, it's going to make more sense to that screen reader. If you don't call these THs, it'll still look about the same, but it just won't come across as clearly to someone using the screen reader. So it will probably look better if you do the TH. You can even do like table sections, like table head and then table body, but you don't totally have to do that. As long as you have the TH, I believe that will accomplish the effect that that video was just talking about. So basically make sure you do it right. If you're going to do any kind of captioning, then YouTube is okay for captioning and it's a good start. And I'm trying to move quickly through this because I see we're low on time. I will show you how to do that actually because I think it's good to know. So let me go into my YouTube stuff. Let's see. Let me take one of these. I don't remember actually if I did do transcripts for these.
In this video, I'm going.
So let me take a look. Sorry, you don't need to hear that. This is a video I made for one of my summer classes, and I know I tried to do a better job with captions over the summer, but I don't know if I did or not on this one. Yeah, okay, I did not. So interestingly, this is what it looks like when you've created a video on YouTube and it's just uploaded. And as it says here, the subtitles are published, but they were the automatic ones. And so what it's going to give me here is the option to duplicate and edit. So that lets me, yes, I'm going to go ahead and continue. I'm going to overwrite the automatically generated transcript. And oh, nice. Okay, so this is actually, they've actually changed this since I last used it, but this is really, I like this better. So here's what it thought, here's what it thinks is my transcript. And it's all, you'll notice it's all lowercase. If there are proper names or titles of things, it doesn't know what those are necessarily. So it doesn't always do a good job of spelling things right. And that's something that is your responsibility if you're creating this for other people. So this is pretty good. Actually, I like this a lot. This is easier than the older version. The older version, you can only view it like chunk by chunk, which was still pretty nice compared to other software, but I think seeing it all together is really pretty useful. Okay, so I'm just going to save this draft for now. But you really should do this. And if you notice in that video from Mark Sutton, I just did display the captions. That's because the way I've set this up, I couldn't hear it. So it was kind of interesting for me to experience it that way. But I was able to follow along perfectly fine because it had well-written captions that not only conveyed what was going on in the video, but also like what Mark Sutton was saying, but also had punctuation and other kinds of structures to indicate what was going on, and so it was easy to follow. It wasn't just like a string of lowercase words, some of which might be the wrong ones. Like, it actually looks good. So, okay, so a couple things. So here's a checklist that you should always keep in mind when you're creating content for the web. You'll notice that there's videos and podcasts, and really it is for video and podcast, it's really the transcript is really the main thing. For web stuff, you do have a few more things that you're responsible for, and in some cases these will be handled more or less automatically by your software if you're using WordPress, but if you're doing this all by hand, you definitely need to do all these things on the checklist. You need to make sure you check for it. Here's some more specific guidelines for different kinds of things. Again, I think these are pretty common sense. If it's a podcast, you should have a transcript. If it's an annotated map, make sure you have text, like clickable or selectable text wherever possible, as including an explanation of how to use it. All your videos should have captions. Social media, right? Social media won't give you much control over how something is presented, but it does give you a lot of control over what you present. So if you're creating graphics, make sure that they have a clear color contrast to make sure that the text is large enough. Make sure that you have a description of each image if you are just posting images. That is increasingly integrated into platforms. So whenever you upload, I noticed on Twitter recently, whenever you upload content on Twitter, it gives you the option to specify an alt attribute. If you don't, it will attempt to use machine learning to describe the image, which may or may not be accurate, of course. So wherever possible, you want to try to increase accessibility by adding those descriptions yourself. Yeah, several other kinds of things, and these are sort of less common, but if you're thinking about Twine in particular, there are a couple of things you want to think about with Twine. So let me maybe jump into that with where is it? With the accessibility tool. Let's try Wave. So this is a web accessibility evaluation tool. So this is something like once you've created some content, you can put it through this tool and get a report about how accessible it may or may not be. So this is not the end all be all. This is not sort of proof that your work is accessible or proof that it's not. It just gives you some things that it can check automatically, and it kind of reminds you about some things that it can't necessarily tell for sure. So I know I'm over time, but I do want to show you how to do this, how this tool looks, and then I'll wrap it up. So this is twine.org, obviously. I'm just going to pick a random one here. Okay, let's see if I can play this one online. Or I'll try this one. Yeah, I have to find one that I can play online so I can demonstrate this. Birdland, cool, right. I think I've read this one before. So if you look at this tool, I just copied and pasted the URL for that one. It's birdland.camp. I guess that's their domain name. Cool. And so what this tool will do is it'll run through the page and then report on what it finds and then highlight things that it thinks might need adjustment. So it's giving me, so this green here is telling me that this was done right. So this was a title, but it's actually an image of text. And so what this creator, Brendan Patrick Hennessy, has done is correct, which is provide an alt attribute that says that's what this image is, right? So that's good. It did find one error, so let's see what the error is. Yeah, so the language is missing. That is obviously something that can be marked as an error. It could be, it could be done. I mean, it could be, it could be corrected, but it's honestly not a huge deal. But it is something that this tool can note. Okay, so let's click into it a little bit, and okay, so yeah, it broke there a little bit. Let's see if I can. Like, I'm viewing this website through a tool here, so it may or may not work. And this is kind of hard to kind of look into it. But basically, this one is done really well. And so this creator, by adding the attributes there, has done it correctly, right? It's also something you can check the tab order by hitting the tab key. And if you look, you can see how the start is currently highlighted with like the dotted outline. I just selected that by clicking the tab key. So the easiest way to check to see if your content is tab navigable is just by hitting the tab key and seeing what happens. So this, as you can see, it's kind of going through my whole browser. But that's a way to test that. And really, that's probably the main thing you'll need to do. Again, any images should have alt attributes, and if you're going to change anything about the style and the presentation of your Twine game, make sure that you keep an eye on contrast. Most of the formats that are the story formats that are just there to use come out of the box with pretty good uses of color and contrast. So it's either a dark text on a light background or vice versa. Links are usually bold and a different color. You could tweak that by customizing the CSS. So if you do tweak that, make sure you tweak it in the right way and not in a way that reduces visibility and accessibility. Okay, so I hope that was helpful. I think there's a lot more I could go into about specifics, and I may with your specific projects. The one thing I hope this conveys is that you do need to think about this. I think several of you, unfortunately, in your proposals just kind of said things like, in the accessibility section, you would just say something like, I plan to make it as accessible as possible, without really detailing any strategies for doing that. And that I usually commented on that if that was the case. Many of you, that said, did have a good explanation of the things you need to be doing. So that I think many of you are probably thinking the right way. Others, you either weren't sure what to put there, or you didn't know what shape your project was going to take yet exactly. So you were kind of vague there. But hopefully, the material here has helped you get a bit more specific in your thought process about accessibility. So it is important. It is the law. So make sure that you do it. If you're not sure how to do it, then I'm here to help. I can help you figure it out. Okay, cool. So I'm going to wrap it up. I will see some of you on Wednesday in person. Everyone else, you should be online, and either be online ready to teach something or ready to learn something. This is only going to work if we have students. So even if you're not teaching, make sure you're online on Wednesday if at all possible, so that you can be there to learn from someone's teaching. Okay, cool. So thanks for watching. I'm going to wrap it up here and then start this again in about 15 minutes for section 2. So that's all for now. All right. See you later. Thanks for watching and have a great day.